What's up, everybody? Now, I'm getting very excited at this point because we're less than a month away from the Leaving the Theater live show on February 11th at the Miracle Theater in Washington, D.C. The theme is Love on Screen, and we'll have a night of comedy, storytelling, and discussions of love in all of its forms in television and film. Tickets are currently on sale, and the link to them and details about the night are available in our show notes. Now, the early bird sale ended, the Oscar bait sale ended, there's only one more discount code available, and only Patreon members can access that code. It's 50% off, and it's available until we sell out of tickets. I've posted that discount code in Patreon, so if you've been looking for another reason to become a patron, you should join us, and the link to join is in our show notes. All right, let's get to today's review, which is covering M3GAN with a returning special guest. I'm Ronald Young Jr., and I'm leaving the theater. All right, this is Ronald, and I am leaving the theater after seeing M3GAN. M3GAN, written by Akela Cooper, directed by Gerard Johnstone, starring Amie Donald, Jenna Davis, Allison Williams, Violet McGraw, Jen Van Epps, Brian Jordan Alvarez, Jack Cassidy, and Ronny Chieng. For a complete cast listing, as always, you can go to the link in our show notes. All right, I am not here alone. I am here with returning guest,
JC Howard.
Yeah, excited to be here. Yeah. Okay, so M3GAN is a story that I'm sure some of you have heard, in which, and if you've seen the previews, you kind of probably already got the gist of much of the movie, but there is a sentient android who is built as a child's playmate, and eventually it becomes self-aware and begins to destroy. That is the gist of the plot of the movie. We'll go deeper into themes, but right off the bat, JC, thoughts?
I loved it. It was so much funnier than I was expecting. I thought that it was going to be, look, it was what it promised to be, which is a mix between iRobot and Child's Play.
Yes.
Right? It was the we can't trust the AI. We should be afraid of what it can become.
Yes.
But then it was also the killer toy, the porcelain doll comes to life and starts wreaking havoc on the neighborhood. So it did all the things that it was promising to do, but then I was surprised by how funny it was, but I shouldn't have been surprised by how funny it was, because that's how Child's Play was, right? Like the Chucky movies, I remember I watched them probably way too early, but I watched them as a kid, and I remember not thinking it was very funny, but then watching it as an adult, and there are all those jokes that Chucky has, and that's what we saw in M3GAN. M3GAN has these little moments where we're in the theater and there's actually laughter. Yes. So anyway, all that to say, I loved it, and we'll probably be watching it again.
So I also liked this movie. I liked it a lot more than I think the trailer set it up as. I think it was more than, for those of you that's seen the trailer and even the synopsis I just gave you, killer robot becomes self-aware. It's a trope that we all know. However, there's two parts of this movie that stood out to me. One, that this is a movie about grief and coping with grief in a way that reminded me of an old 90s movie starring a certain Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood called The Good Son, which was yet another contemplative look at grief and childhood grief, to be specific, to say, what do I do when my parents are no longer here? How do I handle this? And I think what they laid on top of this was a very good millennial tale of someone who is thrust into parenthood, which I think is incredible to talk about. Because, and the one thing I know about this is I've had a friend who this happened to him, where his brother died and he took in his nephew as a result. And I met this same young man when he was 9 years old, the same age as the main character in this film. And I remember meeting him and immediately immediately being like, all right, well, I'm gonna be here for you. And even me as just a side play uncle, essentially in this, is now attached to this child. But being a millennial, it's like thinking about how my friend had to adjust his life to letting a kid in, meaning that he's like, oh, I guess I can't be up all night anymore. I guess I can't just be responsible for myself. I guess I can't let him play with my Funko Pops that are all over my shelves. You know what I mean? I guess I got to do more to accommodate this child. It's not baby proofing, but it's like child acceptance and making it a home for them. And I think this movie tells a lot of that story as well as it does the basic premise, which is robot becomes sentient and takes over.
No, that's right. I think that one of the ways that they did that was with Allison Williams. She just wasn't prepared for this, right? Like she had this, she had this kid who she wanted to be in charge of. Like, there's a part where a therapist asks her, like, do you want to be this child's guardian? And she's like, yes, like I want to do this. But then meantime, you look at her house and it's not ready for a kid. Yes. It has those collectibles that can't be played with. It has like the room that the kid is staying in, I think when she first gets there is like sleeping on a chaise lounge or something like that right next to a Peloton. So it's like she is a millennial.
Well, it was not a Peloton, it was a Nordic Trek. And I want to be clear because I'm like, it seems like Peloton lost some money on this one, but
that's right. Yeah. I should give credit where it's due. Yeah. Nordic Trek is the one who stepped up. But like the bottom line is I think you're right? Like it was exactly that. It was someone who is around our age who was not ready for having a kid and scrambles to do the closest thing. She even kind of says like, this, I did the only thing I knew how to do, right? Which is like, I threw technology at the problem. Yeah. And there's a lot for obviously for us to take about that.
Yes.
Beyond the whole like AI and, becoming self-aware, Skynet, Terminator, like all that stuff, like that's all fine. But the idea of like, throwing technology at grief, throwing technology at pain when we're faced with it. Like Allison Williams has this moment with Katie, with the child, where she basically kind of says like you have to be able to just feel. You have to be able to feel those feelings sometimes. And even that is just like, oh, wait, am I getting a lesson in technology from this horror film? Like, but I loved it.
And it makes me wonder if movies are now taking lessons from Black Mirror, because Black Mirror does a very good job of taking technology and using the technology to tell a story, which I really enjoy, because I think you could walk away from this saying AI is bad. And I know someone specifically who would watch this and be like, I told you, who is like deathly afraid of this exact type of thing happening. But like the rest of us can look at this and see the lessons on top of that and say like there was more than, it wasn't just the technology throwing at the problem. It was the idea that she was now replacing all the duties that she has as a parent and responsibility to this child and trying to shortcut her way into getting to where she needed to go. And the warnings were all there. And it seems like, and it seems like it ends in disaster. But if we take away the aspects of it that are a killer robot and all that, the same disaster still ensues. If we think about the point where she's in the car fighting with Katie, and Katie is like very upset and freaking out and picking up things and throwing them. And this is a child that is coping with grief. Yeah. And I feel like that, to me, I'm like, this is actually the parts they're probably not going to talk about with this movie, but these are the most important parts, because what they're saying to you is you have to address grief head on. You can't do it from the side, which I think this movie, like, I just wasn't expecting that from this movie. What about you?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, of course I wasn't expecting it. And like the fact that it gave us that conversation about how, I mean, not exactly how you should use technology, but like how you should not use technology.
Yes.
To escape from grief, escape from pain. And like you need to be able to just, when the world is coming down on you, you have to just let that happen. And like there's, I don't want to spoil it too much. There is a therapist character in the movie who kind of, as the person came on screen, like, Ronald, you kind of turned to me as
one of the worst therapists I've ever seen in my life. How could you work like this?
She should not have been called a therapist. She was more of like a social worker. Yes. Or like some kind of thing. But the fact that like we got kind of a real therapy session in the course of the movie, not from the therapist at all, because she was terrible. Yeah. But like the fact that we got a therapy session in the movie, it was just like, why is this movie not just teaching me things, but making me feel things? Like it, and then, also trying to scare me at the same time.
Well, let's talk about the scares. Now, I will say, I think I was with it. For the first 2 acts of the movie, I thought they were doing the scare very well. I think in the first 2 acts of the movie, I was like, is this a 4-star movie? I'm watching it. And it kind of started falling for me in the 3rd act. And mostly because I don't know if they knew what their ending was. Because when the ending comes down to being about kind of the metaphor, which is the robot, then you really just have to watch what happens in the final scene when, the robot is finally at its strength. Yeah, we have to watch that. When I feel like there was a smaller resolution that I was like more interested in that they didn't pursue. And as a result, there was 2 things. One, that took me out of the movie. One, that the robot's mouth did not sync with the voice. Yeah. 2, the robot just looks very, very fake.
Wait, hold on. I will say that is one of the things that kept me. Like,
really?
Yeah, the fact that, like, because that's how it would actually be.
That's
right?
true.
Like, you can't even, right now with the technology that we have, you can't even take a TikTok and post it on Instagram without the voices being unsynced. Yes. Right? So if you can't do that, then you couldn't. Like, that is kind of where. So I think that the thing is, the movie did reflect kind of where we are technologically speaking. So it's like, all right, this could like one of the things that a movie like this is trying to do is to tell you, and the thing that Black Mirror does is it tries to tell you, like, hey, listen, this could happen tomorrow.
Yes.
This could happen in your
it's happening now.
It's happening now, right? Yeah. It's happening right next door to you. If this isn't in your home, it could be. Yeah. So that kind of thing didn't really take me out of it. But I take your point, is that like it is a little bit less scary to say, like, what harm can this thing do to me when it can't even like sync its own like mouth with its voice?
And to be clear, it wasn't that I wasn't afraid anymore. That was the problem there. For me, it was just an issue of looking at some of the things where the edges started to fray. And this is a Blumhouse movie, so the budget's going to be lower. And there were some parts of that where I was just like, I don't know, maybe there's a couple of things I would fix in this. But overall, when it became more just about, about what M3GAN was going to do next, and then it also did not really seem like M3GAN had like a true purpose throughout. Like when we get to the end, like her end game is kind of a little muddled for me. Where I'm just like, is that kind of what? Like, I guess, you know what I mean? Yeah. But that being said, it didn't really take away from the parts of the movie that I felt were most powerful, which again, for me was coping with grief and being thrust into parenthood as a millennial. Like those are the 2 parts that stood out to me. How did you feel about the ending of this movie?
I think the ending was fine. Again, that is, I mean, you described the problem kind of exactly with these kinds of movies, right? Yeah. It's like, where do you end it? I mean, I will say that they left it open to have a sequel.
They did.
In a way that is very interesting and intriguing, considering that one of the main kind of ideas behind the movie is machine learning. It's not just AI.
Yes, specifically, yes.
It's not just AI becoming sentient and like becoming self-aware and like starting to do things that you don't expect it to do, but it's about machines actually learning and in a way that we're only used to, like, either human beings or animals that we have expressly domesticated doing. Yeah. So like I think that, so anyway, all that to say, the ending for me was fine. I should also say that I did some reading about this movie a little bit before we saw it, and apparently the screenwriter included a lot more deaths. Like M3GAN had a bigger body count than she actually ends up having in this movie, and I am glad that happened. I'm glad that it wasn't child's play where you just have a killer doll who's going about, like, who's demon possessed and killing a bunch of people and a bunch of things. I mean, M3GAN had an objective. Yeah. M3GAN's objective was to protect Katie. Yeah. And it wasn't the same thing as Child's Play in the sense of, or it wasn't the same thing as Child's Play. It wasn't the same thing as iRobot. It wasn't the same thing as Terminator, in that the objective was to protect this individual. So it's interesting that, like, we are kind of coalescing around these ideas about grief and the ideas about, parenthood, but like M3GAN's perspective as a caretaker, as a guardian, as a parent, so to speak, is interesting. Again, that becomes super weird with the ending. Like, her ending, as you said, like, what is her end game? So I don't know where she was expecting it to go, but I'm glad that it ended the way it did because it could open itself for a sequel.
I agree. I think it was the ending was good enough, and if they make another one, I would watch it.
Yep.
I will say this also reminded me of a Rick and Morty episode in which Summer is left in a spaceship, and Rick says to the spaceship, "Keep Summer safe," and the spaceship does that at any cost, and it becomes not hilarity ensues, like extreme hyperviolence ensues. And I was thinking about that while watching this. Yeah. With all of that being said, what do you rate this movie, JC Howard? Out of 5 stars.
I would give it a 4.15. And I think the reason is because I would absolutely watch it again. I'd probably watch it several times. But, there were, I think, so you mentioned one of the things that in some ways kind of took you out of it was the mouth syncing. For me, it was the other way around, where the thing that took me out of it was, it was played by a human girl. Like the M3GAN character was played by an actual human girl, so her movements were not robot-like at all. Whereas when you watch a Sophia android kind of on YouTube, I don't know if you've seen that, but like there are androids and there are like robots that you can watch, and they have kind of silky smooth movements, but they're not quite human. So there were parts of it where I was just like, this could never happen because this robot is actually too good in a lot of ways. But so there were problems with it, and there were some things here and there where it's like, well, that didn't exactly make sense, early on in the movie, and I won't get too into it. So all that to say, wasn't exactly perfect, but it was good. It was damn good.
With that being said, it was a 4 for me for a while, and then it dropped down to a 3.5 towards the end. And I think I'm solid with a 3.5. I would watch this again. There's someone I want to watch while she watches this movie because I feel like as I'm sitting there with you, I remember I'm having a good time watching this with JC, and I knew we were, but I'm like, there's someone who I would enjoy watching this with even more because this is her nightmare, and just seeing how she would react to this would be great. And I'm saying all that to say that there's group watches and rewatches of this that I think I would really, really enjoy. So any last thoughts?
Yeah, I wonder, does it change your perspective on technology at all? Like, I will say I was given an Amazon Echo Dot for my birthday a few years ago, and I never plugged it in because I don't want machines listening to me, even though I know whatever, like they're not gonna. It's a dot. It's not going to actually like kill me or anything like that. But I don't like the idea of machines listening to me. Does it make you feel like this puts me off of technology even more, or do you feel like whatever, it's just a movie?
We already lost. The minute that we put electricity in our houses, we already lost. It's already over. And the fact is, I know you have a cell phone on you right now, and it is more powerful than an Echo Dot can ever be. So as far as I'm concerned, wire the whole house. Wire the whole house with make everything smart. It doesn't make a difference to me because I think the bottom line is if the electricity goes out, a lot of that stuff's not gonna be able to last anyway, which is the good thing to know about that. Yeah. Now, before I let you go, I have to say, will you be coming to the Leaving the Theater live show on February 11th at Miracle Theater?
I'm going to channel my best Stone Cold Steve Austin and say, oh, hell yeah. I will be there, absolutely. I have my tickets already. I have 2 tickets, and I don't know if I'll be front row because I don't know what time I'll get there, but I will absolutely be there.
I love to hear it, and make sure that y'all get your tickets as well. You can get them from the link in the show notes. And with that, Leaving the Theater is a production of Oh, It's Big Ron Studios. Thomas Tyra of Bias Studios mixes the show. Thank you, Tom. Show art from Heather Wilder. Theme music from the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. For more information about M3GAN or JC Howard, check out our show notes. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Oh, It's Big Ron. That's at OHITSBIGRON. You can find out more about this show and other Oh, It's Big Ron Studios shows by following us on Instagram at Oh, It's Big Ron Studios and on Twitter at Oh, It's Big Ron Stu. Leaving the Theater will be back soon. Thanks for listening. And thanks for being on the show.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me.